So Dr. Charlotte Woodcock.
Okay, thank you very much, Erin. Hi, I'm Charlotte. Just to give a bit of context, I think there's lots of different specialities here today and lots of different topics being covered. So I'll briefly introduce myself so you know exactly kind of where I sit within the myriad of expertise. I'm a lecturer up at Staffordshire University, and I specialise, and a lot of my work has come from my foundation really is within the world of sport and sports psychology. In the past, I suppose, 3 years, I had the opportunity to take what I knew from sports psychology and apply that into a dance context, into the dance world. And when I dipped my foot into that world, it kind of went in a bit further and further and further, and kind of got stuck, and it encompassed me. And very much most of my work in terms of my research and certainly applied practice is now very much focused within dance. So it's a pleasure to be here with you today to share with you some of that work with you and think about the idea of mental skills. Very much just an introduction really to mental skills. What are they, and really what's the potential for mental skills and mental skills training within dance environments? So I suppose my talk has three main aims. So the first one is really to give you a bit of background to mental skills. Where did really the ideas come from for this? What was that work based on? Then would follow just to share with you some of the main components that seem to make up mental skills training programs in the research and in applied practice. I don't unfortunately have time with you today to go into it very much in depth or even cover the exhaustive list of potential techniques that someone might want to put into a mental skills training program, but I'll certainly share with you some of the most common elements. And then finally, just to give you a few questions really to consider about the potential of this kind of work and how it might be integrated successfully into dance training and performance. I have done counselling kind of courses, but I'm not a counsellor in any way. And although the techniques I'm going to share with you have some foundation and basis within cognitive behavioural therapy, what I'm kind of focusing on isn't therapy either. We're very much sitting within the camp of performance enhancement and making the good even better, or the good great. So just to begin then with a little bit of background. As I mentioned earlier, I come from a sport background, and certainly a lot of the work in mental skills has certainly been focused within sport arena, so that's where I'll begin. I guess there wants to be an understanding really of what are the psychological components of excellence, of our elite performers, those who seem to be successful again and again and again. And there's been quite a bit of research conducted in this area, and I've just highlighted a few of those psychological characteristics that we see coming up again and again and again in our most successful of performers. And I think we could put the label up there of athlete, which is where this information comes from, but I think we could put the label up there of any kind of performer and actually say, well, actually, we would like to see these psychological qualities present in that performer to know they'll have the probability and possibility of performing to the best of their ability. Some work done in the 80s with Olympic athletes kind of suggested these were the main characteristics to kind of form this psychology of excellence. But psychology, as we've heard today, doesn't stand alone. So we have our minds, and they're very much integrated and one with our bodies. So although we observed these qualities in the successful performers, we also observed a set of behaviours and mental processes that these performers seem to engage in a systematic and consistent manner. So these performers set and achieve goals. They tend to image their performance before they actually go and do it. They talk to themselves, and that's not to mean they're crazy in any way, but they're being a coach, if you like, to themselves. They're saying things to themselves to get them into a place best prepared for their performance. And finally, they also report an ability to control their physiological arousal. So you can think of arousal as having a kind of an inverted U or bell-shaped curve relationship with performance. At the two ends, we've got our two extremes. At one, very low in arousal levels, you're almost asleep. At the other end, you're bouncing off the walls. If you're either end of those, it's probably not the best place to be for optimal performance in terms of bodily control. So usually there's a midpoint, if you like, where that curve peaks in terms of physiological arousal, which is the best place in terms of energy for an up-and-coming performance. And our most successful performers not only know where that peak is, but they're able to kind of get to that peak and then stay in that peak as well. At the highest level of competition in athletes, and we're talking Olympic athletes, those that tended to come home with the medals did not differ in terms of their physical and technical abilities, but tended to differ in terms of these psychological behaviours and qualities. So we know that psychologically and psychological qualities do matter for performance, and I guess the question is, can we influence that in any way? Because most often people and coaches have focused on the physical and technical aspects of performance and kind of have left the psychological aspects more to chance. And this is really where mental skills and mental skills training kind of comes in, if you like. If we're observing these behaviours and mental processes, if you like, that athletes go through seem to help feelings of self-confidence and motivation, then can we train these behaviours and mental processes and reinforce those so athletes can use them in a way that is effective for them? So as I mentioned, I'm going to share with you the main components of mental skills training, and this is in no way exhaustive, but these are certainly the most common elements. Firstly, that is one of goal setting. So we know that our successful performers set and achieve goals. They have aims, they have targets they want to get to and accomplish. Now, goal setting, that might sound quite obvious if you like, if you want to go and achieve something, but what we know from the research is there are more effective goals, if you like, for kind of pursuing performance goals than other types of goals. So it's not only about using these techniques and incorporating these techniques into your performance repertoire or training repertoire, but it's using them in a way that's most effective for that individual and what it is they want to achieve. I noted that successful performers tend to image their performances prior to performance, perhaps maybe as part of their preparation. And this kind of sits under the label of imagery. And again, we're talking skills, so to think of a skill suggests we have different levels of ability and effectiveness, and it's the same with imagery. So you can think of the effective imagery kind of like a vivid dream. So if you've ever woken up and you've had to take a moment to yourself and think, was that real? Did that actually happen? And you might even want to ask someone, did this actually happen yesterday? It's because that dream was so vivid and so real to that person. And it's the same with effective imagery. It's not simply observing a performance or a movement. It's experiencing that performance or a movement. It's feeling it, feeling the emotion, feeling the movements, hearing the music. It's being aware of those around you as well. So it's really a richness of imagery is the most effective. And what we know is if we put performers into brain scanners and do simple movements, which is the only type of movements we can do with brain scanners for those performers, is that when they image a movement, they start activating similar areas of the brain as when they would actually physically perform that movement itself. So we know that effective imagery is reinforcing that neural network, if you like, of the actual motor skill. I mentioned that successful performers do talk to themselves. Well, we all have an inner voice, and this is called self-talk. Now that inner voice can take on many different guises. So again, under mental skills, it's learning, if you like, what makes that mental voice effective and on your side and being a good coach for you. And then finally, to kind of encompass part of physiological arousal control is the idea of relaxation. A piece of work done recently by Walker and colleagues highlighted that many dancers experience performance anxiety. And part of the anxiety response is the release of adrenaline. And when adrenaline gets into the body, we've got lots of extra energy that we might not need in terms of our performance, particularly from our most challenging types of performances and very precise movements. So we might want to release that energy, or at least potentially reverse that anxiety response. And we can do that through using relaxation techniques. Now, this isn't to say that you can take these techniques as like a nice boxed up recipe and apply them and it will be effective for you. What we know about mental skills training is the most effective ones are tailored to the needs of an individual. And the way you use each of these techniques differs, if you like. They're quite flexible, will depend on the reasons why you're using them. Just to give you a bit of a flavour really of the research behind looking into the effectiveness of mental skills training, there is a body of literature within the sports psychology research, but I'm just going to share one with you today just to give an example. So this study was done within tennis, and they compared two groups of tennis players. Both groups continued to do their normal physical training for their tennis, and they were similar in terms of competitive level and age. The only difference really between these two groups was that one group received a mental skills training program which was 3 months in length, and they received a mixture of goal setting, self-talk and relaxation. So they were the techniques, if you like, that this program was based on. And these two groups, after the program had come to an end, were compared on a number of key variables. And what it showed was actually the MST group, when compared at the end with our physical training group, reported much lower levels of competitive anxiety. They also reported much higher levels of self-confidence. So we're starting to see these psychological characteristics of excellence coming through. And probably working through these mechanisms, we saw greater performance improvements in our group that had the mental skills training as well as their normal physical training. And this is very much representative or illustrative of the mental skills training literature. I wish I could share a dance one with you today, but there isn't yet, if you like, in terms of at least for training and performance enhancement, I'm aware of anyway, a mental skills training program that's been tested in terms of research. It's certainly a need, and there's certainly scope for that work to be done. But moving on to dance, where does mental skills training fit in? Can it fit in? And I think there's certainly hope for that. There's been some exploratory work, some descriptive work done with dancers. And I had the privilege to be part of that work a couple of years ago with my colleagues at the University of Birmingham. And what we found with vocational dance students in training was that they use mental skills already as part of their dance. And we see this in sport as well with athletes, because they realise through trial and error and experience that these behaviours and mental processes benefit them in terms of their training and performance. So they do use them. And this is just an example of goal setting. So this is a very short-term goal that this dancer is describing in their quote. And very much using this idea of reminding themselves of exactly what their aim is for this particular performance, is using it in a way to help them to focus their attention appropriately. They're not thinking about the people in the audience, or they're not thinking about how good everyone else is. They're very much focused on themselves, what they can control, and what they want to do. And again, there was examples of imagery use by these young vocational dancers. And imagery is a very flexible technique and can be used in lots of different ways, but really this example is reflecting the idea of building dancers' confidence for mastering a particular exercise or motor skill. So they talk about picturing themselves and being able to control that imagery as well. So almost rewind and pause the image in case they will just want to go over some technique again. Dancers also describe using self-talk. Again, they might not be aware of it or call it self-talk, but there's certainly illustrations of that from this qualitative work. This dancer is using self-talk in a way to help their determination or motivation to keep going. They kind of remind themselves that they are good enough, they can do it. They call it kind of a pep talk that they give themselves, and it certainly helps them in terms of difficult instances, if you like, of ballet class. And then finally, we also have an example of the relaxation, and in this case it is very much in relation to that idea of emotional control, and this dancer used deep breathing, which is really the foundation of relaxation techniques, is about deep breathing and controlling that breath, and this dancer is using that to help them lower the intensity they're experiencing in terms of their anxiety. So if dancers are using mental skills already, I guess the question is, do we actually need mental skills training? And I suppose what I'm trying to be suggesting through the talk is we do use these skills because they are effective, but we might not use them all the time when we need to, and we might not be using them in the most effective way either, of what we know in terms of the research into each of these techniques. In terms of mental skills training for dancing, I certainly think there's opportunity, and I guess I'm not alone in that kind of position. the best mental skills training, or the most potential in terms of mental skills training, are integrated within curriculums and training curriculums. They're a part of the process. They're not necessarily something separate. And it has been noted that mental skills in dance, if you like, is very noticeable in its absence from this being integrated into training curriculums. But there is certainly potential for their inclusion. As Dave Collins suggested, we're all human, and what we're talking about here is a performance setting. So even though a lot of the background has come from sport, what we're seeing is dancers do use these skills. There is potential for mental skills training within the dance context. And we're not reinventing the wheel. We're simply refining and reinforcing, because dancers do use these skills. So we're not starting from scratch in any way. Really, we're just simply firstly enhancing awareness of what they do and what is most effective for these dancers. And when people become aware of what they do that's effective and actually helping them, then that can reinforce them to repeat those behaviours and repeat those thought patterns. Also, in a recent piece of research, we note that teachers support these mental skills use in training as well, because they know intuitively and through their experiences that they're beneficial. So they might want to remind a dancer in class, what's your aim for this class today? What do you really want to get out of it? And what they're doing there is supporting their goal setting, supporting their goals. So dancers support mental skill use as well. So really all we're talking about is just supporting those processes that are already there, refining them and making them as effective as they can be. So the key components of a mental skills training programme that to consider really, and there are some questions in here. The first step is to conceptualise the programme. I've offered 4 kind of key components, if you like, but the programme itself in its content and how those techniques are delivered and the reasons why we'd want to use them all need to be kind of researched and investigated. And we do that in order to be able to tailor a programme to the specific needs of the individual. You want to time implementation, if you like, of a programme well. It's almost too late, if you like, the night before or the week before a big performance to start thinking about doing some mental skills training. They are skills just like physical skills, and you certainly wouldn't think to just go through your performance once only the night before going on stage and think that would be fine. So these skills and the programmes behind them need to be implemented well in advance, and I say the best way is really to be fully integrated with the physical training as well. In terms of actually practicing the mental skills and refining those, well, they need to be delivered. There needs to be an educator, a supporter, if you like, to work with the dancers and what they already do and enhancing what they already do. And that can involve potentially a sports psychology consultant or a performance psychology consultant, but hopefully and preferably it'll also involve the dancers' teachers and maybe choreographers, because they're the ones who will be supporting their continued use in the training environment. So hopefully it'll be a collective, if you like, team of delivery. And there needs time for practice. And I use a phrase we've already visited here today, and that's one of deliberate practice. So that's not just simple repetition, but practice that has a specific aim, if you like, of enhancing these skills. And then finally, the application phase. So taking, moving on, if you like, from the period of training and actually testing these skills in more pressurised situations. So that could include a simulation. So if you're preparing students for the audition process, actually creating a scenario where they're actually being auditioned, albeit mock, but certainly have a simulation, increase the stress levels and test to see if the skills remain in place and are effective for the dancers. So we basically want to be transferring from the training environment to when it matters most. And then finally, we want to monitor the skills and evaluate the effectiveness of the programme to make sure that it's working in the way that we hoped. Just a real note to leave you on today, mental skills training certainly isn't a panacea for performance psychology. It's just one component of many factors that can influence the quality and a dancer's experience of both training and performance. So it's certainly not the only thing to focus on. There are certainly lots of other things that we need to consider, and we've heard lots of things of what those might be today. But it certainly offers a possibility, and it offers something that we can do something about and something that we can control and work towards in terms of helping performers to mentally prepare themselves in a way that gives them the best possibility for them to dance to the best of their abilities. thank you very much for listening. Cheers.